The Roswell crash of
Yeah.
47?
Yeah. I don't know. That one, I'm not, I don't know. I don't know. Seriously, I don't know. You're looking at me like,
It's an interesting one.
You just looked at me like,
Come on, bro.
Come on.
If you know,
Tell
you
me.
wouldn't tell us. That's the problem.
Or would I?
No, you wouldn't. You wouldn't be able to.
There's a whole segment of society out there that believes that I'm just here to push disinformation. Right? That's my job.
All right, guys, we're back with our favorite ex-CIA agent, Mike Baker. This was his 19th appearance on the Joe Rogan Experience, which has to be a record for a non-comedian. Baker's first episode was number 541 way back in 2014, so he's basically had 2 appearances per year for a decade, and this guy still does my head in. First of all, why does he hold his cigar like this? Now, I'm not a cigar smoker, so I googled how to hold a cigar, and I couldn't find one image with someone holding the cigar the way he does, which makes you wonder, as a former CIA agent, you'd think he would be trained in how not to attract attention to himself, yet here he is holding a cigar like a tool. But hey, like I said, I'm not a cigar guy, so maybe that's a legit way to hold one. I don't know, and let me just say thank God JRE is back on YouTube. The comment section is getting out of control, but in a good way. Mike Baker bugged the room and he comes back every few weeks to change the batteries. Whenever Mike Baker is on the pod, you know the entertainment will be in the comment section. When I saw the thumbnail, not this effing guy again, then click just to read the comments. Joe's CIA handler reminding us who owns us. Remember, there's no such thing as a former or retired CIA man. Joe's quarterly check-in with his CIA handler. Mike Baker, finally back, was wondering what the CIA wanted me to think. So clearly, people are sick of this guy and his boring-ass talking points. Within the first 12 hours or so, the views weren't as great as some of Rogan's other recent episodes, and even Rogan was looking for a way out by the end of it. However, the question everyone wants to know is, who exactly is Mike Baker? Is he really Joe Rogan's CIA handler, or is he just another grifter in Rogan's orbit? I'm going to answer this question by the end of the video, so stick around, there's a lot to talk about. But if you're new here and you end up enjoying this video, make sure you hit the subscribe button and give it a like as well. That way you won't miss out on any of my uploads.
I wanted to ask you this before I forget.
Yeah.
When you were working for the agency, did you guys, I know that there is a program where they use special effects makeup to change someone's appearance. Have you ever seen that in person?
Oh, yes. Yeah.
How does it look?
Yeah. It gets better all the time,
So
right?
could I go to a concert? Like, could I sneak into sneak into a concert with a rubber nose?
Yeah. No, we have a disguise unit at the agency, and I'm super proud of them. And I was the benefit of their expertise on numerous occasions, because you might guess, I mean, I'd spent almost all my time with the agency overseas.
So they blended you just like on Team America World Police? Remember?
Yes.
Bro, show a picture of that guy.
One of the greatest. Hans Briggs. Hans Briggs.
How good is that movie?
Yeah, it's the greatest movie ever.
They're the best.
Yeah.
Okay, so here's
John
a video.
Mendes, yeah.
So this is from the disguise. Wow,
yeah,
look at
she
the
was there.
pores.
She was, senior officer there.
Were you ever talking to someone? I think this motherfucker's wearing a disguise.
No, but I've talked to people wearing disguises. I've had the full overhead mask.
Look how good that is with sunglasses on. With sunglasses on, that's crazy.
I never did wear the monkey outfit. And here's the thing about this, is that, because what they did was they went to Hollywood, and there's been this liaison for years and years between the agency and Hollywood when it comes to special effects, when it comes to makeup. And I'm not giving away any secrets. This stuff is all out there. And you get a light disguise. It's for a brief, cover for action. You're not going to be engaged in this.
So what would be a light disguise?
Like a rubber nose. Yeah, it could be like a wig. It could be facial hair, change of glasses. Could be just a change of hair color.
So the whole time I was watching this, I thought to myself, remember that guy who went on Rogan's podcast with Josh Dubin and then dismembered some guy a few weeks later, and his body parts were found in his freezer? Yep, that man was Sheldon Johnson. And the reason why it came into my mind was because of the disguise he used to throw off the police, which was caught on CCTV. Now, if you want the full breakdown on what happened and who this guy is, you can go and check out my video covering the details. But then a few minutes into this discussion here about disguises, Rogan actually mentioned Sheldon Johnson and his wig.
Did you see that I had a guest on the podcast that came with my friend Josh Dubin, who works with criminal reform and getting innocent people out of jail? So we had this guest that came on, and then after he was on the show, wound up killing somebody, cut some dude's head off, and
Yes.
And the unfortunate surveillance footage where he tried to wear a blonde wig and walk around.
Yeah.
It's like crystal clear that this dude was wearing a fucking wig.
God. Yeah, that was. Yeah, that's a hell of a story.
Crazy story. I was explaining that to my daughter last night. This is what happened.
God.
I love how Mike's reaction seems like disappointment rather than shock. You can tell him and his team watched Joe's podcast pretty closely and felt like Rogan let them down by slipping up and having the next American Psycho on the show. And this wasn't actually the first time Rogan addressed the freezer killer on his podcast since it all went down. A couple of weeks ago, when Andrew Schultz's side piece was on the podcast, Rogan went into a little bit more detail about the whole situation and tried to justify the craziness of it all.
I've done a ton of podcasts with Josh Dubin, who used to work with the Innocence Project. They find people that are wrongfully convicted and help them get out. We've had a bunch of those guys come on the podcast, including one guy who came on who was actually guilty. He was guilty before, and we knew he was guilty, but he got 50 years.
Right.
And then he was talking about he turned his life around, and his a month after he was on the podcast?
Yeah.
How long was it after he was on the podcast? 2 months? Maybe 2 months? Homie didn't understand new HD security cameras. Like, this dude put a blonde wig on. They got crystal clear footage of him with his goatee on, wearing a blonde wig, carrying some dude's head.
How sold were you in the room with him? How good was he at selling himself as this reformed person?
So he didn't kill anybody in jail. And then he's out now, and he's got this new lease on life, and he's out, and he's trying to do something different with his life. When you listen to his explanation of what happened, why he went to jail, some dude owed him money. Some dude, some drug deal, and the guy was like, "F you." So he found the guy, and he pistol whipped him, and he robbed him.
Okay.
And he got 50 years for that.
Right.
He was a habitual criminal, for sure. Well, should he have gotten 50 years for that? Well, I don't know. I mean, it seems like when he got out, he was kind of a bad guy.
Yeah,
but was that because he spent 25 fucking years in jail? And
so you're saying, did prison make him much worse?
Did prison make him much worse? Because it certainly can with some people.
Yeah.
But we've had people on that were innocent, and prison made them amazing. I mean, something about like the constant studying and the accepting your situation in life, even though you were innocent. They lost 20 years of their life for something that was bullshit, complete bullshit. And then you find out that the cops and the prosecutors who were involved in their case had done that to many, many, many people. That's another thing that people need to take into consideration. How f***ing dirty some people involved in prosecuting and convicting people are.
Yeah, that explanation from Rogan is absolutely wild. I knew when all of this came out that he'd be saying something along those lines. You know, the whole idea that because he spent over 2 decades in prison, that tormented him because he didn't belong there. So when he came out, he was even more damaged than when he went in there. Now, I want to get back to Mike Baker in just a moment, so I'll say this quickly. If you watch the actual episode with Sheldon Johnson, he clearly still had that gangbanger mentality. You could tell he was the same person he was when he went into prison, just from the way he saw the world and the stories he told. I honestly think that Josh Dubin let Rogan down with that one. He would have spent a lot of time with Sheldon, and with his experience with criminals and wrongfully convicted felons, he should have figured out that this was the wrong guy to bring on JRE. Anyway, I thought I'd mention that because Rogan brought it up with Baker, and I hadn't really addressed Rogan's comments in the aftermath of the arrest yet. But back to this episode, the thing I find so funny about Rogan's conversations with Mike is just how much Mike rambles about politics. He seemed to be pretty hung up on the Israeli-Palestine conflict, which he kept looping every conversation back to, and just going on these endless rants pretending to represent every side of the argument. And he also rambled about the Russia-Ukraine war, and you could tell that Rogan was getting pretty sick and tired of it all, so he found the perfect opportunity to derail Mike's epic rant.
The White House is saying, no, we don't want to escalate, so don't do that, right? Now, the other side of that coin is if you f*** over the Russian energy infrastructure, what does that do to oil prices around the world, and what does it do to gas prices at the pump when you're in an election year? I don't want to be a conspiracy theorist.
Oh, boy.
But Macron is over there saying, well, if Kyiv asks, I can see putting French troops on the ground in Ukraine.
He's trying to distract from the fact that his wife's a man, right? Yeah. Bro,
I like that. No,
that is the wildest one I've ever heard.
Yeah.
I'm so confused by that one.
Oh, God.
I've tried to look into that one. I really have. And to my own embarrassment, I've looked into it. This woman that he's married to, even,
I can't believe it.
even if it's a man, they had a relationship when Macron was 15.
Yeah.
And she was 39. That by itself is wild.
Yeah.
Because if it was the opposite, if it was a 39-year-old man who was a teacher and a 15-year-old girl was a student, this would be horrific.
The best part was how Rogan didn't just mention Macron's wife in passing, he committed to it and started diving into the details. We've heard him talk about the age gap between men and women being treated differently based on if the guy is the older one or the younger one in the relationship. But what I don't seem to understand is why Rogan keeps having Mike on the podcast. Maybe he thinks that he's going to get some inside information from him. Others speculate that Rogan has some deal with the CIA to have Mike on twice a year to push their talking points. But the real question is whether Mike Baker is actually a former agent or if he's still active.
Some conspiracies are real.
Exactly, yeah.
Some of them are real.
Oh, yeah.
My favorite one is the Roswell one, because if that one's real, the Roswell crash of 47.
Yeah. I don't know. That one, I'm not, I don't know. I don't know. Seriously, I don't know. You're looking at me like,
it's an interesting one.
You just looked at me like,
come on, bro.
Come on.
If you know,
tell
you
me.
wouldn't tell us. That's the problem.
Or would I?
No, you wouldn't. You wouldn't be able to.
There's a whole segment of society out there that believes that I'm just here to push disinformation. Right? That's my job.
Yeah, there's definitely something suspicious going on here. I've put in a lot of time listening to the Mike Baker episodes, and so many other JRE listeners have noticed this as well. His talking points are so long-winded, and it's not that they're political, it's more that he tries to water everything down to relieve the anxiety people have. That's what makes me so suspicious about his current role with the CIA. Now, obviously, I have no evidence of his connections to them other than what he says publicly on the podcast, but let me show you guys exactly what I mean. Here's a clip from 3 years ago where they were talking about a whistleblower that blew up the internet. I actually had to edit this down quite a bit because Mike was umming and ahhing so much. So take a look and I'll pick it up straight after.
Here's my take on it. I think he believes what he's saying, right? I think he has gone out there. I think I'm legit. Look, he was a 14-year veteran of military. And I think he went out and he talked to enough people. I don't think he's out there like spinning a yarn and is worried that now he's gotten over his skis and he's said, too many things. And maybe the difference between us is I spent, a lot of time with the government, and sometimes it can be really, really dysfunctional. And it goes back to keeping a secret. The idea that they could have this what essentially is a covert action campaign, to spread disinformation about what they actually know, right? When the easier thing to do is just to have the program and just keep your yap shut about it, not go for a disinformation campaign, not try to muddy the waters by doing this, because in a sense, you're just creating more conversation around it. You're creating, now there's a little bit of a, movement within Congress to say, we have to do this, now we have to. So they're going to look perhaps for a misappropriation of funds, right?
So you can see how good he is at taking a really safe middle-of-the-road perspective and then immediately deflecting and going into unnecessary administrative details to avoid answering the question. Now, I've always said that conspiracy theorists give the government too much credit. It's hard to keep a secret. People break all the time. And I guess they were talking about a whistleblower there, right? But let me show you another clip from 5 years ago where he almost completely ignores Rogan's questions about the CIA withholding information from the public and instead decides to plug his new show.
When they do release things, like long after, like I was reading something, I forget what the case was about, but it was something about how the files won't be released under the Freedom of Information Act until 2080. Mm-hmm. Well, how do you?
Yeah, I know.
How do they make that like that was the thing with the Kennedy assassination, right?
And sometimes they roll it over and it's not even then. So some information comes to light periodically. And so this does look at this show will be looking at some historic, but a lot of current things that are going on and where the money goes, right? What are we spending our money on? I was lucky to be able to work with, again, some really great people on the production side, but just also going out there and meeting some of these cats. They're just the shit that they do is even after being around a while as I have, it just amazes me.
So I only edited a few seconds out here and there to make it flow a little bit better, but that was pretty blatant from Mike. He completely deflected and avoided Rogan's question, which I think as a former CIA agent who supposedly doesn't have any ties with them anymore, he probably should have an opinion on this, especially if he's going to come on the biggest podcast in the world twice a year. So that's why there are these two camps. On the one hand, like I said, there are the people who think he's clearly still linked with the CIA and either Joe unknowingly has him on because he thinks they're friends, or there's actually an arrangement there between Rogan and the CIA. But then there's the camp that think Mike's just a grifter and he's convinced Rogan he's a smart guy so he can keep plugging his security company to tens of millions of people on the podcast.
Well, you're here because you're a nice guy and you're a smart guy and you actually know what you're talking about. So I don't. I know what I read, and I go, oh, my God, what does that mean? And so I can have you in here, and you can explain things from a guy who actually understands the You had the best explanation of what's going on in the Middle East I've heard yet.
Well, thank you. I appreciate. Do you mind if I do now on the heels of that? Do you mind if I do a little shameless marketing?
Oh, there's some shameless marketing.
Okay, so we've got the President's Daily Brief, the podcast. You talk about Hamas and the Israeli conflict now, and there's a minefield here. Actually, one of my managing directors for my company, Portman Square Group, for all your information and security needs. Thank you. One of the managing directors knew that I was going to sit back down with you. And they said, look, I know you're probably going to want to talk about Hamas. Is there any way you can do it, right, without pissing off people?
That's cute.
Yeah, I know. That's what I thought.
All right, so this is how I see it, and just to be clear, I have no evidence of this. This is just my opinion from watching a bunch of Mike Baker episodes on JRE. I don't think there's an actual agreement between Rogan and the CIA where Mike Baker is the intermediary or the handler and Rogan agrees to have him on twice a year, otherwise they'll shut him down or whatever. I think that's a little bit far-fetched, but I definitely believe that Mike still has ties to the CIA and either his security company is an extension of the agency or they let him have it as a front. That would be a classic CIA move. Just have a think about the way Mike talks about wars and conflicts and anything else Rogan brings up. He's always offering the safest take, he's always watering down any government involvement in conspiracy theories, and he constantly shits on whistleblowers or anybody suspicious of government programs and activities. But as for the idea that he's grifting as well, he kind of reminds me of a Barry Seal-style character who the CIA controls, but lets him keep the money from his exploits. And think about this though, right? Do you think Mike Baker's typical client would be a JRE listener? Like, surely most of his clients are corporations or high net worth individuals. I doubt they're the type of people who are listening to Joe Rogan's podcast. I don't know, I could be wrong, I don't know who they are. But the whole thing definitely smells fishy to me, and it's one of those things where once you start asking yourself those questions, you end up going down a rabbit hole. But thanks for joining me on this one. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Let me know what you think in the comments below, and remember to check out my Patreon via the link below if you're interested in additional uncensored content. I just uploaded my full breakdown of Brendan Schaub's lawsuit appeal, so you can go and watch that now if you're interested. Otherwise, if you're not a regular of this channel, hit the subscribe button, and don't forget to give me a thumbs up if you ended up enjoying this video. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you in the next one.
You don't want somebody to go into the prison system and come out worse.
Right, and which happens
most
right?
Of the time. And then we hear about these horrific incidences. Parole board let him out. 2 days later, he pushes somebody into the train tracks, right? This is not what you want. How do you prevent these things from happening, right? By being proactive, by being responsive instead of being reactive. Don't wait for something to happen.